My guest today is James Brett. James is co-founder of Oasis Within, and he helps leaders and professionals find more harmony, insight, and purpose in what they do. His own journey has shown him that true leadership isn't about pushing harder, it's about slowing down enough to really listen. Today, James is going to share his story and how his path has led him to bring together achievement and awakening. Hello.
Oh, that sounds so juicy, Nadine. So
Oh,
thank
we've
you
had a
for
nice,
that.
nice long preamble before hitting record. So yeah, we there's no doubt we're gonna have no shortage of things to talk about. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I would love for you to kick us off by taking us on a bit of a journey, and if we could go back, rewind the clock about 6 years from now, and tell us what you were up to then, and then we'll kind of go on the journey of like how that's evolved over the last few years.
Sure, sure, sure. And that feels like a lifetime ago, but it's a beautiful way to start. And thank you again. It's a real honor, and I'm really grateful to share space and have an opportunity to talk on this podcast and to your audience. So yeah, back in wind back sort of 2019, that time. So I had a long background in working in corporate and in top level selling. So sales ended up through a sales career from selling hotel dining through to selling food, selling, worked for the largest importer of wine and selling alcohol across the UK and Europe. And that didn't, in the end, resonate and align with me. So I left that and started working in education, in companies supplying software and educational IT to support raising standards and engagement and connection. So that was, I did that for almost 10 years in the UK, and then came to Australia and was working for a big multinational working across Asia Pacific. So fast forward from that time to 2019, I was really at the top of my game, but pushing really hard. I was leading bid teams on large procurement, so whole of state government, so led the team to win the Department of Education South Australia contract for over 900 schools with a school management system that manages all of the demographic and assessment, all that data, a learning platform that supported online learning, engagement, parent portals, finance system, real end to end, as they called it, an education management system. So that was, yeah, a real pinnacle in terms of sales and success at that level of looking to impact a whole state, to move them forward with technology and systems to support teachers having more time to teach and less doing admin and more engagement for the community, parents and students. And I got a real track record for leading teams, leading procurement bids like that. And at that time as well was then there was a team in Singapore that was a subsidiary of the company I was working for that was struggling. They had a big tender coming up, and there was dysfunction in the team. And my MD at the time said, I don't want to deal with them. You go. And sort of parachuted me into Singapore, and through a process of me, it's interesting because sometimes I feel I'm not actually doing anything. I'm just being in presence and being slowing people down. And obviously, there's coming to a clear vision, but then in that slowing down and people stepping into their presence and being and listening, they access their own wisdom and knowledge. And that comes, and the team shifts from dysfunction into coherence. And we won. Yeah, that one it was almost $92 million. It was a massive,
Wow.
massive tender. Um, and so super, super successful. But there was also a lot of pressure in terms of maintaining the sales, and it was having an impact on my system in terms of the amount of flying, not eating that well when you're eating in nice hotels. You had a nice allowance, so I wasn't looking after myself physically as well as I could have, and even though I'd have some, practice where I'd be yeah, would be very calm, present, listening. There was at that time a bit of a disconnect still to the body. So I was doing a lot of work around the mind and settling the mind, creating a space where fresh insight and fresh thinking can arise from a quieter mind. But then the body wasn't being really looked at after when I look back then to that time. And so I started to have this sense of I'm getting burnt out, but was hanging on for long service leave. The great thing in Australia, you don't have back in UK that you get all 10 weeks. So I just kept hanging on. And then obviously, we came into COVID, um, which was a real gift for me, a real gift because it slowed down. The schools were all shut. And so I couldn't go out on site visits and meet people. So I was just had all of that time at home on really good pay. And so I was doing all of this deeper spiritual work, did some things which I've never really spoken about, even some deeper plant medicines. One of well, it is the strongest um, psychedelic on earth, 5-MeO DMT. I even did a 6-day journey with that, which is a ritualized ego death, where it's that psychedelic will literally rip the ego, the identity, the self-image away. But it's very, very disruptive and in hindsight, it was too disruptive to my own energy field, thinking back to what happened later with my cancer and trauma. But I was in this sort of deep exploration of who am I, and then was also a bit of that, oh, I need to get rid of the ego. Let's see what it's like with no ego, no identity, no self-image. And what happened is at that point, my ego came back actually more strongly following that journey. I was having had this lovely relationship with this New Zealand girl, and that collapsed. She couldn't be in the same room as me when I was sort of sharing that story of just being one, no other, just being completely one with the universe. And then I started working with this spiritual coach in the US who said to me, well, you're working with me for the next year. You can't ever do that desert medicine, that bufo, that toad medicine. It's too disruptive to your energy field. And so I said, yeah, I'm committed to that. There wasn't a calling. And as I continued that journey with him, there's not been since then in my own journey of waking up to who I really am, the essence. Um, there's not been that seeking of needing to go back there. But that was sort of that COVID time gave me this time to really stabilize, establish um, my own spiritual meditative practice, um, doing some other trainings as well with some leading um, trainers in the space of how understanding the nature of mind, the nature of thought, um, and when we're in our calm, in our balance, in that state of yeah peace, then we have this space for fresh insight and thinking, and that's powerful in corporate where people are just pushing, pushing, pushing. So, so within that, when sort of COVID lifted and then I sort of said, okay, I need to finish with working for that corporate and had my long service leave, and then went back to the UK. And you can tell as I said, originally from the UK, and I have two children who still live there. So, at that time, I had my mum who was on her own in Spain and was actually not wanting to leave Spain. You know, she was in her late 70s, but was like, I just want to stay here. I haven't got long. I want to stay here. But she was starting to get dementia. And that was the sort of thinking back. My partner, Lisa, we were at this beautiful festival in Snowdonia called Spirit Horse. And on that in that festival, we were sort of walking along this creek with bilberries, like wild blueberries. It was like Lord of the Rings, and we were sort of walking down this creek, and then we hear the sound of this Indian flute, and there's this guy on a cushion just on the riverbank, just playing this beautiful flute, and it was really magical. But I got speaking to him the next morning at breakfast, and he shared with me that. 5 years before he'd come to this festival, he was in India with his master and was had a call from his mum, who was an alcoholic, couldn't move out of a chair, to say, "You need to come back and look after me." And he left the master and went to live with her, and he lasted 2 years before he then started drinking and became an alcoholic. And then another 2 years before he had a breakdown, and the social services came in. And he sort of looked at me because I shared with him the trauma. I've got that history of my parents both being alcoholics, and a lot of violence, both physical and mental, verbal. And he looked at me at that breakfast table and said, "Don't let this happen to you."
Mm.
Um, and that was for me this inception point of fear, that because my mum was so loving, but was also had this polarity of also being really, really nasty, and particularly with alcohol, and particularly to my sister. And thinking back, that's also been a thing of me wanting to move over to the other side of the world um, as I was thinking about that earlier. And so when yeah, that sort of brings us forward, because there was the cancer, which was almost 11 centimeter tumor that was growing off my right kidney. They told me, the surgeon, that's probably been growing there for a couple of years in a cavity without you even knowing. And the kidneys in Chinese medicine are the seat of fear. And so that was that inception point. I love that movie, love Christopher Nolan movies, but there was an inception point there of fear, the fear of losing my physical life, and obviously losing my material life at that time, of having to go back to Europe, leave Australia and what we've been building here, to look after my mum. So there was this I guess, yeah, a bit of internal conflict, and between wanting to be the good son and go and care for her, and then also a bit of resentment in terms of, because of the path that she'd led in terms of at that time, in terms of just alcohol, and how she was managing to live through her own trauma. And so there's been a big journey for me of forgiveness, forgiveness for myself, forgiving myself for judging myself, and also forgiving her for knowing she was doing the best she could for how she saw it in the moment. And they didn't have, that generations, the same access to tools or capacity, even, I think, to even so it was easy just to numb through alcohol and that be a way. But as you go deeper in with that energy, it's obviously, yeah. I remember doing, yeah, I'm talking a lot here, Nadine, around that. So there's lots of things we can explore around that. And then, yeah, do you want me to keep going?
You can keep going. It's
It's
it's an amazing story. I love it.
so there was that thing happening in Spirit Horse, and Peter sharing me that, and then I remember, like, oh. And then we came back, and then we're traveling up and down the mid north coast and south as well, and up to Queensland in a bus. Looking, we were like, we don't want to stay in the cities anymore. We want to be in nature, and we both wanted, me and Lisa, to create this sanctuary, a place of transformation, which is now a place of transformation and healing.
Mm.
And we're traveling up and down, and then we settled. We fell in love. Even came to this place by accident. Lisa put in the wrong address, and we sort of turned up at this place thinking we were viewing another property, and we're like, and the woman was like looking, yeah, really confused. Why are you here? And it was for sale, and so but we loved it. And then we'd been on this project of building and wanting to create this sanctuary, this center, where we can share our gifts and support others and be of service. And a year ago, 3rd of September, though, I had to go in for major surgery and be cut down the middle and have a tumor and this right kidney removed. And even that story is really magical and gives me goosebumps. Um, I was 2 months before, my mum was deteriorating again with dementia, was getting stronger. She'd have moments of lucidity. Um, and I'd sort of say, okay, I need to go back. Said to Lise, I've got to go back. I've got to go and spend time with her. And so there was this, yeah, I've got to do the right thing and go and care for her and see if I can get her back to the UK, where she can be cared, because there's very little infrastructure in Spain for the elderly. And and so I decided, it was Lisa's birthday's the end of July, and we'd said let's go and do and work with this tantrika, a yogini who's does Taoist Chinai Sang stomach massage, and also some ancient forgotten tantric rituals. And so we were sort of, that sounds a really beautiful combination. And I was having this Chinai Sang stomach massage on my stomach. And they were sort of, the facilitator was sort of just pushing around, and they could feel on the right side that there was tension and tightness. And I was like, oh, that's a bit sore. And so she was working in energetically to work on that right side, and then was saying there's something deep in the tissue here. It's a dark mass with tentacles. And I was like, whoa. And then she says, I can't get it all out. And then the bell rang, and then you sort of change partners, in terms of we were going to do another um, activity around that retreat. And then I was like, oh no, that's fucking bad. That is part of my language, that it's stuck. Um, I want you to get it all out. And so we retreat finished, went to Sydney. I was feeling absolutely exhausted. And then we came home on the Wednesday. The next day I woke up and I was peeing blood. And I was like, oh no, that's really, and then in pain. I've got such a high pain threshold. But Lisa's like, yeah, okay, it must be really bad if you're saying this is really, really painful and sore. So I rushed up to Coffs Hospital, and then had a scan. The doctor came out, took a massive inhale of breath, which was, oh, that's not a good sign, is it? And then he said, your right kidney's in a right mess. It's got a dark mass with tentacles coming off it.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
was like, oh, I get goosebumps even now sharing that now. So it was almost as if that work with that Chinai Sang had energetically brought it to the surface.
Mm,
And they said, yeah, it's probably been growing for a couple of years. It had started to move up the intravenous canal, um, and was so it was stage 3.
wow.
And so they, yeah, had to cut me down the center, take all of my intestines and everything out, and then get to the kidney and the tumor, and then put everything back in. And that's really the was the hardest and the most, yeah. When I almost died was that I had a bowel obstruction. So your intestines are almost 10 meters long. So when they put it back, it's bound to kink. And
Mm,
I was given amazing, amazing care by the health service here. And the one thing which, in reflection, and it's typical of Western medicine, is the nutrition guidance was lacking. And they'd put me on opiates, endone, strong opiates. And I
mm,
was like, okay, Lise, will you go and get me an omelette? Yeah. And they didn't sort of say, no, you just need to have broth, because your bowels are going to be pretty upset after, 54 years to be all be taken out and pushed back in. So I was then lost 11 kilos of weight, was yeah pretty close to to not being here. And but at the same time, there's with all of the work I've done around surrendering, softening, accepting what is, um, there was that releasing and letting go. And I remember going into theatre at the time of being in real surrender and peace, and the body feeling soft. And when I had the bowel obstruction, I was in hospital. That's what I was just letting the body soften, the mind soften, and in that softening, the bowels untwisted, and I started to flow again. And then yeah, and then I got my health has been coming back. I've been on a big journey, and then another. I'll take a breath, but I've been in China working with the Taoist master and doing ancient practices to bring harmony to the body, to listen, be able to listen to the body and bring that connection back to when I started, where there was that disconnection to the between my mind and the body, to really seeing how precious the body is, and we need to listen to it, and we need to care for it and nourish it
Mm.
in the right way and move it. And in that, my vitality's returned. I just last week had my follow-up monitoring scan, completely all clear. My left kidney is even stronger now, so it's
Wow, that's so
strengthening.
good.
Where before it was struggling, a few month after the bowel obstruction that cleared, I would fall over when I was, going to bend over. I just literally fall over. Kidneys and ears, there's a connection. And so now, yeah, I'm feeling back up and yeah,
Fired up
come
and
on.
ready to go.
So yeah, there's
Amazing.
a bit of a big download there,
Yeah,
but
such an amazing story. And the reason I asked for you to go back that far is because I'm really curious about that kind of, you were deep in the corporate world, and part of your story is that you've had to learn to unwind and become more present and stop and rest when your body tells you that you need to. So you've had all of this stuff that you've learned, but also it's almost it feels like you were beginning a preparation for this moment where you had the darkest night of your soul almost. And had you not had some of those experiences where you'd started to explore your spirituality, you'd done a hadn't you done a what, not just your psychedelic experience, but didn't you do like a 2 day like out in nature, nothing
yeah,
else
I thought,
but
yeah, I thought,
water? What do you call
well,
it? A vision
yeah,
quest.
Vision Quest, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Because there's been, yeah, I've done it. Yeah, there's been a beautiful 10-day, which I did early on in my corporate career in Australia, actually, a 10-day Vipassana, so 10
Oh yeah.
days in silence, which was really, really powerful for me. And then the 4-day vision quest through the lineage of grandfather Stalking Wolf, with yeah, she's a beautiful, or both of them, Lee True and Gina Chick, who won Alone
Yeah.
Australia a few years ago, one of the first women to win that incredible energy and bushcrafter, and just what a force of nature and good in the world she is, and Lee, yeah, and Lee too. So yeah, did this 4-day vision quest, which does interlink actually to the story, because yeah, and as you said, there's these explorations for me of the edges of consciousness, of like who I am, and seeing the levels of resilience that's innate. And I remember going into that vision quest. It was down south inland, on the south coast, inland from Milton, on some beautiful, beautiful land there. And in a way, I went in there being a bit cocky in terms of, I can be in my own mind and body, and this is going to be easy. And or I was properly given a good serving, because when for me, I still like my carbs. I'm like, should I go keto? But I don't think I'm allowed now with one kidney. But I'm cutting my carbs down. but I that not eating food for 4 days,
Mm,
and so there's a detoxification that happens on the physical level. And then there's this detoxification that happens on the mental level and then the emotional level. And then, they call them these four distinct or but they meld into each other, all of these things. And then the spiritual aspect of that work of questing. When you're on your own in a 3 meter circle, you have to dig a latrine somewhere you can, poo into. And I remember digging that, and then my body just went into like this constipated, I'm not going to move anything out of this for 4 days. So I'd be looking at my beautiful hole that I dug. And then my mind going out of control, like I can have a busy mind,
mm,
which again is one of those things early on in my corporate career is very much around how can I control thinking, control the mind, doing neuro-linguistic programming and doing this aspect of then how can I influence people um, and be a better communicator and control states because I would get very nervous when I'd stand up in front of people when I first started. And just a quick, yeah, I remember being in the UK in front of 200 teachers and was trying to do this presentation, and my hand was so nervous I couldn't stop the mouse button, just triple quick
mm,
clicking. So I was doing this presentation, and it was sort of jump on 3, 4 slides, and they were like, this is, and then try and wind it back. So I did some work there around, being in presence and and NLP initially was doing that to, do your thumb and finger together, and then you feel confident, and then you can go and talk to people. But even that wasn't longevity, and so I was exploring consciousness, exploring things, and the Vision Quest is an incredible and challenging but beautiful. I mean, I remember the first day, the birds would be and nature would be cautious. Who is this person? Which is obvious, me like, oh, I'm physical trauma in my mind, and then I was seeing things in the trees. My daughter and son, their faces, and it was you don't have any reading material or no technology, nothing to write with. You're not allowed to do breath work or movement. You have to just be with you. And that can be challenging when I could see, even with all of that work that I'd done, there was still this distractions that I would do, and then with no
mm.
food, it started to rev up. So I got really, really busy, and then would sort of sleep during the day, and then would in the night when it was really cold, it was raining, it was even a bit of snow, it was insane conditions, and I would like be just just time just sort of starts to elongate. You've got no idea what time it is because you don't have a watch. Sort of it just, obviously that you can when the sun comes up and the sun goes down, but then in night it just would be, felt like a lot of trauma.
Wow.
And then the last day was this dropping into this deepest, deepest peace and the connection with nature, the trees, a wedge-tailed eagle flying over the top of me, just that connection,
Mm,
birds coming closer. And then it makes me feel emotional now in terms of just the connection with all of these ancient old trees that was where my site was, just on away from there were 12 people questing, but you're all very distant from each other. So it just felt you're isolated. But just feeling, having this message from the trees that you are worthy. You're worthy.
wow.
There's a sort of edge there for me that's been around not being worthy.
Mm,
And that's, I think, also created some of that pushing to prove my worthiness, which is, wrapped
whole
up
nother
in
thing.
a whole nother thing. And,
Yeah.
and and when we came here in our bus, as we were leaving this land and we found this address by accident, as I said, there was a wedge-tailed eagle that flew
Mm,
over the top of the bus. And I was like, oh, we're meant to be here. This is where we've got to build our home. And
lovely.
yeah.
So that experience, where did that come in the whole? picture of the Vision Quest. That was part of your journey to sort of develop your and improve your mindset for the corporate world. Were you still and training other people to do the same, to kind of be at your peak game in the corporate world by using spiritual practices? Is that kind of where you were at that point?
Yeah, so yeah, well, it came. Yeah, I mean, started when I came to Australia in 2010. Um, then I was married then, and I had two beautiful children. But my marriage imploded, and my ex-wife went back to the UK, and then I did a lot of soul searching in terms of do I need to go back, and was doing and but I started at that time doing was already on my path of meditation and doing different meditative practices, and hosted a workshop at my place in French's Forest. I was living in Sydney then, with the Monroe Institute, and that's a not-for-profit in the US, with a beautiful man who's not with us anymore, but his legacy continues, Bob Monroe, who he was doing research into sound waves and how
Mm,
different sound waves in the left and right ears and the hemispheres could then alter your states of consciousness. And so I was doing this, hosting this workshop, and then actually participating in it as well with these on my on at my place, and had this deep experience. He would call them. He didn't want it to be mystical or have any dogma, so we'd call them like Focus 10 and Focus 12.
okay.
These different levels of consciousness. And in that Focus 12, you can ask a question. And I was asking, should I go back to the UK? and and I had this just really vivid image of all of these um, people dressed and in Australian yellow, cyclists cycling around this mountain to this peak. And I was like, okay, I have to stay. I should stay here. And that was really challenging as well from that, in terms of being away for time from my children. They would come here, I would go back there, and that was one of the benefits of having a really good corporate job, is I could um, that gave me that ability, that choice. Um, but I sort of saw then that was at that point, that was when I was on my own, that I was then really able to really devote a lot of time when I wasn't flying and doing um, sales and working, to inner work. And so that just continued through that. So it would have been around just before COVID, I did that Vision Quest.
Mhm.
And part of that is we wanted, yeah, because we also did some bush mentoring to teach rewilding to children with
Ah,
blue gum, which followed on after that. But that was yeah, I think there's been a shift for me, whereas I was initially early on was looking at how can I improve my performance
mm,
and connection and rapport and create the least resistance when I'm talking with someone. So how do you then match body language, and even the language of how you speak and what you talk about. We spoke a little bit about this before we even turned on the record, around these personas. I could
mm,
have these personas, and it was like, how can I really um, maximize my capacity to be a great salesperson and impact through. So a lot of my early development from 2010 was around that, and then like it was the rabbit hole started to open up, and I started to then explore different aspects of consciousness and what is real. Am I my
mm.
thinking?
Right.
What is it? And that's what led me back down to sort of then looking at what's it like to have no ego at all, and self ego, mind, identity. What is that like? A curiosity,
Mm,
which, as I said, in hindsight, everything happens as you shared, in terms of it's part of my journey of being every step a necessary step to who I am and who I will become. So there's a um, recognition of that, is that was part of my journey and part of the journey through healing, is to have all of those experiences. But I, remember going to see just before, I didn't mention that actually, just before I was going in for surgery, I started seeing this shaman in Bellingen called Simon
Okay.
Green. And he does like a cranial sacral therapy and then sort of starts to tune in and share a bit of your life story about what's been happened to you and why what's going on in your body. And he shared that he gave sort of these um, milestones throughout my life. He talked about when I was at age 3, I was exposed to enriched uranium, and that was a time when I was in Germany with my mum and dad, where he was in the army, and I remember having a picture of me around tanks as at that sort of age. And then, and that's the only thing. Well, where could you be around enriched uranium? He said, well, that was the time when your waters started to get dirty. But he says you've been doing things throughout your life where it's like you've been pumping a bicycle pump with the end of the pump turned over so the energy couldn't escape. And I was like, oh, well, that's probably that toad medicine was definitely like that in terms of it's like hanging on to the outside of a rocket, just for your sheer life as it's torn apart. It's like, yeah, okay. I can see that could do that. And so and then he also said there's some deep grief here with your mum. And I'd had a Zoom call a week before. My sister had been there, and my mum had said to Carol, are you going to come and can you come and look after me? And she knew, my mum knew in a lucidity that I couldn't come. I'd been told I couldn't travel. I had to go in for surgery. And my sister said, no, she can't. He can't, and I can't with all that's going on. And so I had this beautiful connection with my mum. Um, and then the week before my surgery, I had this call from Carol, my sister, to say, Mum's passed. And so there was this letting go. I mean, she was ready. She lived a really full life in that, and said a lot of alcohol fueled experiences and adventures. But she was ready. There was a letting go and releasing, and that's is what happened. I saw that shaman, and the next day when I woke up, I saw him again a second time, and then when I woke up, I had this big flush of blood. And I was like, oh no, no, it's not good because, what's going on? And then that's when he sort of said, that's when your mum passed, when you're on the table with me. There was a letting go.
Oh, wow.
And so yeah, and so that sort of span of I'm thinking about your question you first asked, is there was a lot of me working on my self for self-improvement and then a shifting into um, that resting in being. So how can I be in the world but not of it in that way? So I want to be fully in. I want to be
Mm,
fully in this world, but I also want to, I know the essential nature of my being is peace and happiness. That's, I'm innately well in terms of my essence. Um, the physical body, can be, is a reflection and is, part of us, but we're not limited by it. And so that's been my deep practices of then been exploring that and how do I stabilize and establish that, because there are still moments where a relationship and experience can knock me out of that, and then I get lost in the world, lost in the emotion. I'm very sensitive, as energetically very open, so I can feel other people's energies. And emotions even can sometimes get amplified, which means I can then get, if I'm not in balance, can feel that I'm feeling something that isn't even mine. Yeah.
mm. So that's kind of where you're at right now with just sort of trying to find that balance between well, it's almost like yin and yang, isn't it? It's the flow and it's the action.
Yes, yeah. So with for me now, there's that. I always felt, and always one of my gifts was this capacity to listen. Um, but what I'm seeing and knowing is there's no end to how deeply and deeply you can listen. And listening, when we're really listening fully, listening is presence. You can't be thinking and going in here if we're listening. And so that's something which, as I listen more and listen to more to my body, and then have that just internal and that practice of just slowing down and resting in being, kind of resting in being, resting as being. So as awareness ourself, the space in which everything rises and falls. Um, that can be veiled by a thought or
Mm,
a series of thoughts. And that becomes where most of us, and that's where I've spent a lot of my life, and that's been the work of the nature of my journey, and also what I love to share with others, is is shifting out of the foreground of experience where we spend most, where there's that almost like gravitational pull to our thoughts, our feelings, our sensations, our perceptions, is the gradual and the falling back out of that foreground into the background is where we then rest in being. We rest as being. We rest as awareness, and that's in what's the space in which everything arises and falls. And so that's the dance. That's for me, and the practices that we may do. Meditation and movement and breath, being in nature, all of these ways where we can then just find those are those pathways which can give us the glimpses, and then they can become bigger, and then we can start to stabilize and establish that grounding, that knowing of who we are, whilst always also being fully in the world.
mm,
So that's for me the real juice of like the edge of how we can be in our fullest power, feeling our freest. So when we're in that complete freedom, we love more. We're loving ourselves, we're loving everything and everyone. And then that also means we've got the most power, not the power over others, but the power to impact and do what we want to in the world in the greatest and best way we can. So that's the distillation of what I'm now seeing and what I want to share and what we're sharing around that, with a mixture of practical ways to be in the matrix, and then these deeper ways, which then it becomes just the nature of our being.
mm. That's I want to talk to you about what you're doing right now, but it's just I just wanted to um, share a bit of like just a current experience for me is over the last few years, or like 3.5 years ago, I stopped drinking alcohol, and I sort of became realized how it was like a trying to fill the empty moments, those points where it is about being in presence. It's easy to fill it with something else, reaching for my phone, for example, or yeah, anything to fill those gaps. And I see it with my kids as well. I've noticed it recently. There's this desire never to be bored. Yeah, if I'm
Mm.
not doing anything, then I should be doing something. There's that, and I don't know if that's a societal thing, but it's like trying to fill that space rather than becoming witness to what's actually happening in that moment. Yeah, so I just thought I'd share that little
Yeah,
bit. That's
beautiful.
kind of
And
about
beautiful.
my current experience and just
Mhm.
that witnessing and yeah, just also stopping when I want to reach for the phone or fill the gap with what should I be doing, that there's an empty moment, and actually just being in presence. And my kids are there reading a book or playing, just watching
Yeah.
that and finding joy and happiness and love in that.
Love it, love it, and that's so beautiful. And yeah, it's we can we can do a pattern. Yeah, it's a pattern interrupt, isn't it? Where
Mm,
we're just breaking that pattern, which um, has yeah being created in the mind, and then can become become sticky. And I remember talking about that. I remember I would say to my children sometimes, well, can you just be bored?
yeah,
Well, see what happens if you just be bored for a
yeah.
while. What comes out of that? Because there can be this resistance or not wanting to even um, turn towards something that can feel uncomfortable.
Mm,
And when we turn towards that and bring it to us, um, then and befriend it, bring it, then there's a shift in our being, and out of that boredom become comes creativity, comes a spark, a zing. Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I see that with my kids. Like they'll often go towards, yeah, creativity if they're in those moments where it's like there's nothing else to do.
Yeah.
Um, I am just in awe of the fact that you had this huge experience, near-death experience only just 12 months ago. And that not only have you made an amazing recovery and you've taken a whole bunch of time to really sort of tune into what you need physically, emotionally, for your wellness, but that you are offering that service to others. How do you come to that decision? How do you find the balance in taking care of yourself after such a huge experience, but also then offering to essentially take care of others?
Yeah, great question. So it does come back for me around listening, and again in terms of um, with one kidney, our kidneys are our store of energy. And so in Chinese, in Taoism, and they talk through our life force coming in through, into the lower dantian, into the kidneys, and then up to the heart and lungs. And so one is I've been really, really tuned to know when I need to rest. And I didn't used to. And going back to, I would just push through. I would, you know, used to drink relatively amount of coffee, particularly when I was in corporate. I'd be drinking, would sometimes be drinking 4 or 5 cups a day at one point, and then would scale it back and finding that was frying my adrenals. And so I don't drink coffee anymore. And a little bit of cacao. That's a beautiful, gentle plant medicine, which I still love. But again, some cacao can be a bit like speedy, a bit and than others. But again, I won't have. Whereas before I go, yeah, let's go ceremonial dose. We're going to go, you know, 40, 50 grams. Let's go all in. I'll just have a gentle more. So there's a tuning in and then a listening. And so I will often, yeah, just have a cat nap and a sleep in the afternoon when if I'm just feeling tired. And then also what we're doing here on our lands where the city people, my parents did have a garden nursery at one point years and years ago. So I had a little bit of experience on land, but this is completely different in Australia in terms of how incredible it is, but the amount of rain and then sunshine and how quickly everything grows and then everything gets weathered as well, and you have to maintain it and look after it. And I was trying to do all of that as well, well when we first got here and upskill and then grow our own food, and then want to build a retreat space and where we can start to hold space and support others and share the things we love and that have impacted us. But I was trying to do all of those. And so there's been a scaling back of getting help, getting people. to come and support who are, aligned. And then we have travelers, international workaways that are traveling that can come and stay and share what we're doing with what we're doing. And that's something that's really made a difference. And so that tuned in to make sure that I'm honoring my body and listening. And then, um, yeah, there's this calling to be of service to how can I support others in this world that's seemingly becoming even more chaotic and polarized, to bring people into balance to, so they find their center, they recognize and know their true nature. So, they can firstly accept and, know that they can't control everything, but you can be in the world with grace and love, and our energy and our presence will impact the world and others, and so that's a calling to say, well, yeah. And sure, we're still on a journey of finding the right rhythms for that in terms of how we share space and also how people get to know about what we're doing. I've been a little bit hermited, and sort of almost reclusive in a way in terms of getting out, and even in our local community. It's only now we're starting to meet and share a bit more and connect with people. And so there's that energy of saying, this is, you were given a second chance, James. You almost went. And there's one thing I know we haven't spoken, and I don't know how much of your audience and listeners know about the gene keys.
Hmm.
Um, but in the gene keys, my pearl, this, my biggest contribution to the world, this sphere, this archetype, this energy is gene key 48. Um,
Oh,
and
well.
I remember listening to Richard talking on an audio of that gene key and saying that um, one of the things with that key is around the gift is resourcefulness, and I see that I've done all of these different explorations and have all of these different practical tools and a knowing and resources. And he said to me, and I listened to him, he said, and if you don't start sharing these and just sit behind your screen, you might actually get really, really ill. And I'm like, oh, fucking hell, man. What is that? So I better get out of trying to, yeah, um, just support a corporation making, and that corporation, although they were doing some really good things, they were also very focused on profit first. And I want a more conscious world, which is people, planet, and profit.
Yeah,
Um, and
nice.
so that's a driver to then share and work with leaders and people in transition, and to support them on their journey, and
Mm.
to then, yeah, this world, this place is so precious, that we need to look after it and we need to look after each other. And so that's community and connection. And that then makes you like, okay, I need to get out of my little shell, and and yeah, and that's where that brings us here today.
Wow, that's very interesting. With the 48 as well, because it's my, oh God, my brain's a little bit fried. Um, you got life's work, and then the next one.
Biggest challenge?
My biggest challenge
Evolution.
is it
Yeah.
what's the oh my evolution. Yeah,
Yeah.
my evolution is 48.
So you will know
And
those energies.
the sun, yeah, I totally recognize that energy. And the sun is transiting over 48 right now. Yeah, it's in the 48. So I was reading about it just yesterday because I am very familiar with the shadow as well of inadequacy.
Empathy. Yeah.
Not being good enough, not being ready, wanting to learn more before I share, all of those
Yeah.
things.
Yes.
But there's
Yeah.
that, and it has been a big, yeah, a big one for me as well. Resourcefulness, sharing resources, and that's really what this podcast is about. And I've also got the 45, which talks of sharing resources. So, um, yeah,
And that,
It's
I also have the
wonderful.
45. That's my radiance
Oh, there you
in
go.
yes.
So yeah, it does feel
Yeah.
very very important, and you put it beautifully with with the work you're doing. And I was going to ask you as we sort of come to a close about purpose, and you and I have both drawn wisdom from the gene keys, and it's almost like an affirmation to see it written in your profile, isn't it? But yeah, I don't know what I was going to say. I, okay, here's a little aside for you. I didn't tell you. I didn't tell you this at the beginning of our conversation, but last night I went to a Taylor Swift tribute with my kids in Coffs Harbour. We had a little bit of a late night, so
Love it. Love it. Yeah.
which
Well, I
we don't
can.
normally do. So my brain just went, "Ooh," it just went silly. But yes, the gene keys are an amazing tool to guide us as well.
Yes, yeah, and they've been, yeah, they're a beautiful part of shadow work and a gentle part
Mm,
of cleaning up, and such much of that transmission is, yeah, echoed in my life and supported me moving and, yeah, embracing my shadows and seeing the gifts and those highest expressions, and so. There are moments where, back your question, because I was thinking, reflecting on this, because with AI, there's now so much knowledge. When you're talking to AI, they know more knowledge than me. They just know more. But there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom.
wisdom.
Yeah, and so that for me is how, when we find our and the ways we find our ways into presence, into balance, into our center, that's a space where wisdom can flow that's beyond the intellect, beyond the knowledge.
Mm,
And we all have that. We all have that capacity, capability. It's the same with me with doing all of these Taoist practices to make the body like water, to move like an octopus, like a jellyfish. Well, all Taoist alchemy is the conscious cultivation of energy to become a master of energy. And we can also consciously, through the indirect path, the practices of movement and breath, and all of those other beautiful practices that can bring us into presence. And then I said the direct path, I love the Vedantic part where we turn away and we fall out of the foreground into the background. And in that space, that's where wisdom resides. And then that can also flow to allow us then to navigate even greater uncertainty in the world. So that's the invitation to play with that, and yeah, in our presence, in our listening, will transform our relationships and the world as well as that deepens, rather than falling into the distractions and those
mm.
sides. Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that's a really great place to sort of bring our conversation to a close, because in the world of internet and being able to access so much information, we feel like we need to be doing so much more, and that the small things that we do in our everyday lives don't matter, but in fact they do. That's where the most magic happens, really. It's not with, yeah, it's in those daily routines, those connections with other people in your surroundings that can have that knock-on effect. It's not kind of like achieving something um, based on what you see on the internet.
yes. Agreed. And we don't, yeah, never underestimate the power of a
Mm,
smile and a conversation. And as more of us, this step, stabilize and are in presence more, we listen more, we connect more deeply, um, that makes a difference. It will impact the world. When we step out of just being in the phone and the polarity and what's the division that's being sort of almost accelerated through some of the news and the
Yeah,
media.
yeah,
Yeah, it's yeah, I'm seeing that yeah, our presence and the little things make such a difference.
yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
Is there anything else you want to add before we close, James?
Well, I've loved the conversation with you, Nadine. I'm
Yeah.
conscious of myself. I've spoken a lot. I
Oh,
can go on
I
until
love
I
listening to the story, so thank you.
And so, yeah, well, yeah, I'm really grateful to have a conversation. I know if you're curious about what we're doing here, please have a look us up, oasis-within.com.au. Our vision is also to have some online
Yeah, cool.
resources and content as we come into the future, so you don't have to just travel to our beautiful paradise on the mid-north coast. Um, and so there's that from that aspect, but also, yeah, hopefully you've heard something that will make you curious to keep looking and yeah, the one thing I'd say is our listening, bringing your best listening to
Mm,
every connection. The deeper you listen, the deeper the connection, and that's something simple that we can exercise and build on by just remembering that we can control the level of our listening and bring our highest listening, and that will transform relationships just with that simple practice.
mm, beautiful. James, thank you so much for joining me. Take care.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much.